Hi, today we're going to take a look at the new Nikon D7500. This is the newest member to the D7000 series, and we're going to compare it to the D7200, which we reviewed here last year. So let's take a look. Today we're going to take a look at the newest member of Nikon's D7000 series, the D7500, and try to determine what it brings to the table and who might be the target audience for this camera. Less than 2 years ago, we looked at Nikon's previous most advanced member of the D7000 series, the D7200, and how it compared to the D7100. On this review, we shall take a look at the D7500 versus the D7200, as well as try to understand the camera's true place in Nikon's current lineup. Let's start with the build quality and design. The D7500 is very well built like the rest of Nikon's camera line. Externally, the camera is not very different than the D7200. There are some minor changes like moving the stereo mics from the top of the camera and the ISO button to the top of the camera, which is actually a welcome change. On the downside, Nikon did move the metering button from the top of the camera, which we don't appreciate that much, but with the limited space on the top of the camera, we guess that something gotta move. The biggest external change on this camera is the new screen. It is truly fantastic, as good if not better than the one on the D500 and much better than the one on our Sony a6500. With tilt function, great viewing angles and amazing viewability in broad daylight, and a really nice touchscreen which has been upgraded from the D500 to also control the camera menus. The camera has a new eye sensor which turns off the screen when you put your eye to the viewfinder, but it can be a bit annoying at times when using the monitor. Nikon finally moved to the common micro USB from its proprietary USB connector on the previous D7000 cameras. We're still waiting for manufacturers to move to a USB-C as a standard, but this will take at least another generation or so it seems. We also want to see USB charging on DSLRs, something that many mirrorless cameras allow and might be an option with USB Type-C. Two changes that we do not like that much are the move to a single SD card slot, UHS-1 only, down from a dual SD card slots of previous D7000 series cameras and all other advanced Nikon models, as well as the choice of a different battery which gives 15% less official battery life than the D7200. This last one is a bit regretful, although the battery life of this camera is still very good. Do note that many third-party batteries don't seem to work with this camera, same as with the D500. Besides these 2 points, we also noticed that the camera has no connections for a better grip or vertical grip, which all previous D7000 models had, something which apparently got quite a bit of negative reaction from Nikon's customer base. We also discovered that the top screen is a bit smaller than that of the D7200, but we didn't find this to be a major drawback. On the plus side, the camera is a bit lighter than the D7200 and has fixed metal strap holders instead of those triangular ones that make noise on most of Nikon's cameras. Now let's move and do some testings. We have ran a number of tests on the D7500 to see how it performs. We tested the image quality in stills compared to the D7200 and the now quite old D7100. The results are very interesting, although not entirely conclusive in our opinion. The D7200 and the older D7100 has an advantage in terms of resolution, and you can see this clearly in the images, especially with the D7200. The D7200 also seems to perform more or less as well in terms of noise up to ISO 1600, but from ISO 3200 there is an advantage to the newer D7500 sensor, although it isn't huge and both cameras perform pretty well and don't seem to break up. We would not use any of these cameras in ISO 6400 if we didn't have to, although the noise level of the D7500 at this high ISO is visibly lower than the two other cameras. We also noticed that the colors of the D7500 is more in tune with the older D7100 and to our eyes seems more accurate than those of the D7200, but this might just be a glitch or something wrong with our testing. The second test that we have performed has to to do with shooting speed and buffer. The D7500 shoots 2 frames per second faster than the D7200 at full resolution with no crop, and we did test the buffer and we found out that we can record 42 raw 14-bit images on the D7500 and only 22 raw images on the D7200. Certainly a big improvement. Our short autofocus test with the Nikon 105mm f2.8 lens wasn't really conclusive, but from our actual use of the camera we have seen pretty similar speed to the older D7200, and in general different lenses affect the autofocus speed more than switching bodies. Now let's talk about actually using this camera. We used the Nikon D7500 for about a month, and we used it with a number of Nikon lenses as well as a new Sigma 100 to 400mm lens which we recently reviewed and loved. In general, the D7500 performed well, although we did run into a number of anomalies. The autofocus system for shooting stills functioned nicely most of the time, but in a few occasions and with different Nikon lenses and third-party lenses we did get some misfocuses that we don't think should have happened. There can be many reasons for that, so we should leave this one open. The camera's new 180,000 pixel RGB metering sensor didn't impress us, and we tend to feel that in some situations the camera has been underexposing. What is certainly not open to debate is the video on this camera. While the 4K quality out of the camera is very good, the autofocus in video is unusable by any standards with tons of hunting, just like the rest of Nikon's current lineup. We continue to see this as Nikon's biggest shortcoming in today's market, one they might not resolve in their DSLR lineup anytime soon. Bottom line, if you want to use video on this camera, manual focus is more or less your only choice. One last point about video. The Nikon D7500 has the same 2.2 crop in 4K video as the D500, something the new D850 finally eliminated. This is usually a bad thing because you need very wide angle lenses to shoot even normal angles, but we did discover that for some macro video shots it can actually be pretty useful. A small yet important advantage of the D7500 over the D7200 is the ability to change the aperture in both live view video mode and during actual video recording. This is something that all Nikon cameras should allow, just like all Canon DSLRs do, including the D3000 and 5000 series cameras. Another small but nice change with the D7500 is that the info is displayed by default on the back screen, although you can turn this off in the menu if you like. This is similar to what we had on our old Nikon D5000. The D7500, like all recent Nikon cameras, has built-in wireless capabilities and include Bluetooth 4.1. This allows for snap read support, although we didn't have a chance to really play with it to see if it improved since our original and not too positive experience with the app on the D500 last year. So let's conclude this review. The D7500 is a perplexing camera in our view. It takes a few of the D500's strongest features, including the sensor, processor, and screen, which has even been somewhat improved, and placed them in a smaller and far less expensive body, creating a very capable action and sports stills camera. The perplexing aspect is what Nikon decided to remove from this camera. We can understand the choice to stay with the existing autofocus system of the D7200, which isn't half bad, but removing the second SD card, the grip option, and probably the biggest drawback in our view, the elimination of the legacy lens support, is just taking the camera too far down. Some people went as far as to say that Nikon's choice with this camera make it no longer worthy of the D7000 series title and instead should have been called D6000 something. We actually feel that the proper name should have been Baby D500 because in essence this is exactly what it is. In terms of pricing, at the moment the D7500 sells for around $1,250. We expect this to go down a bit in the next few months to around $1,100, which will be significantly less than the D500, which currently sells for around $1,900. At the end of the day, we will say this: if you're shooting sports or action or just want the fast frame rates and large buffer of the D500 and don't want to spend close to $2,000 on that camera, the D7500 is a very decent option as long as you understand its limitations. For the rest of us though, the D7200 will continue to be our recommended mid-range all-round APS-C DSLR for still shooters, at least until Nikon will come up with a worthy successor. So that was our look at the Nikon D7500. You can read the full review on lensvid.com, where you can also find all of our test shots made with this camera. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find more videos like this. See you next time.